Ever notice that when you try to understand the world, it looks like a jigsaw puzzle with a couple of pieces missing? Well, that's because it is. Hi, I'm Charles Messing, and here's where we try to find and fit some of those missing pieces. Our program focuses on the living world, on the diversity of life, but it also looks at the world that living things, well, live in, and how that world came to be. What was the ancient world like? How did it become the world we see today? This should be good. I've heard a lot of buzz about this one. Geologists are like detectives investigating the Earth and its history, while paleontologists study ancient life. And the subjects of both are often treated like mysteries waiting to be solved. Michael Brett's sermon once wrote that being a paleontologist is like being a coroner, except all of the witnesses are dead and all of the evidence has been left out in the rain for 65 million years. He was talking about the extinction of the dinosaurs, but there are lots of puzzles that can use the same approach. The history of Florida, for example, land from the sea. A real whodunit.
There's a woman here to see you, a Miss O'Shaughnessy, and I think you'll want to see her.
My postdoc, Effie, is extremely bright, but has this old-fashioned idea that I'm a ladies' man.
Miss O'Shaughnessy, you can come in. Thank you. I inquired at the university for a paleontologist or geologist, and they directed me to you.
I suggested that she tell me about it from the beginning.
My husband and I divorced recently. No, you needn't offer condolences. It was a blessing, and he was much older than me. And he was always close with our finances. Very old-fashioned, actually.
There seemed to be a lot of old-fashioned going on around here today.
I obtained some very important properties as part of the settlement, including an island in the Bahamas. But as I was going through the papers, trying to make sense of things, I found this.
It was a map, but a strange one. Looked like the cartographer might have been into the sauce.
I can see Florida, but where is the Atlantic Ocean? Where is my island? I don't see any of the Bahamas at all. No Nassau, no Abaco. What is this going to do to property values? Should I have asked for the house in the Hamptons instead? Can you help me?
I reassured her that I would get to the bottom of it and that she should just stay calm and wait for my call. Now there's a mystery to get on with. Where do you hide a chain of islands and an ocean? Well, the Atlantic Ocean was still there. I flew over it on the way over here. And Nassau was as solid as ever. Maybe that map maker was as screwy as those guys who believe in the Bermuda Triangle. My contact, Neil Seeley, told me to meet him in a deep road cutting north of the airport.
Hello there. I see you found some of our geology.
Hi, Neil. Thanks very much for getting over here. I have a mystery that I really want you to help me out with. I got this map, and it's a puzzle. Here, help me take a look at this.
Okay, looks familiar.
What is
This is Pangaea, as the name was given to the continents when they were combined into one supercontinent. And here we've got obviously South America scrunched up against North America, and Africa filling in this bulge here.
And I've got Florida.
You've got Florida, and the Bahamas is missing.
Yes, I know. That was the mystery.
That's the mystery. Well, what happened, of course, was that along this gap here, there was a fracture in the Earth's crust, and the different parts of this crust then started separating.
Neil told me that the initial separation began about 200 million years ago. By the way, we left the U.S. state boundaries in here so you would know where we are. As molten volcanic material welled up along a long rift in the sea floor, it forced great sections or tectonic plates of the crust apart, and the new Atlantic Ocean filled the gap.
That created the space where the Bahamas is today. As they moved apart, the southern part of Florida and its extension into the Bahamas and northern Cuba, and in fact as far down as the Navidad Bank off the Dominican Republic, was created. It was a sort of stretched piece of the North American plate, which thinned out and formed a little peninsula.
The continents continued to separate, and rising sea levels kept this peninsula flooded for millions of years. In these shallow waters, algae and other marine creatures deposited their crusts, their shells, and skeletons of calcium carbonate, eventually accumulating layers of limestone over 19,000 feet thick, forming both the Bahama Banks and much of the Florida peninsula we know today. Lower sea levels during glacial times exposed the banks, allowing waves and wind to build up terrestrial deposits. So all of this is limestone, and this is a part of the story.
Yes, that's true. It tends to be the end of the story, or very close to the end, compared with 200 million years ago. This is on land, so we've actually moved out of the sea onto the land. And once it got above sea level, conditions were right for forming sand dunes. And this is essentially a fossilized sand dune, or a series of sand dunes.
Can I take a piece home of this?
Yeah, you can take a piece.
Great. Ah, perfect, perfect. Yep. So that explains why the island wasn't on the map. So much for worrying about her property values. But let's find out more about what happened since that breakup. Not her divorce, I mean the breakup of Pangaea. For this, I was going to have to hunt down the results of some deep geology. I went over to Tallahassee to see Cindy Fischler, a geologist with the Florida Geological Survey. One way scientists at the Geological Survey investigate the Earth's interior is to drill into it. Most of the Earth's crust has been deposited in layers, and the deeper you go, the older the layers. Drilling boreholes allows geologists to extract long cylinders or cores that reveal the succession of sediments, rocks, and the fossils of creatures that were once at the surface. The Geological Survey has an enormous collection of drill cores from all over the state, which they keep in this climate-controlled facility. So I understand you've got some long pieces of Florida history here.
Yes, we do. This is a well from Central Florida. These wooden blocks tell you the depths of the core from the surface. So starting at 0 here and going through it.
Zigzagging along.
Zigzagging along,
okay.
Up and down. These are marine muds.
Mm-hmm.
When then we go into limestone.
Limestone again, huh?
Yes.
I've seen that before. As we went deeper into the core and back in time, I learned that Florida and the Bahamas were both part of a huge platform of limestone being accumulated in shallow water, though there were temporary periods of exposure. Just as in the Bahamas, any organism that produced a mineral crust, shell, or skeleton might contribute to the incredible accumulation. And we are about how deep here?
Here we're getting down to about 1,800 feet.
1,800 feet, and still the Eocene.
It's still Eocene.
So we haven't even made it back to the age of dinosaurs yet.
No, and this is not all the core either. We have breaks in the core that we've put out here because it was just more limestone.
Now what we're seeing here is time in reverse. As we move backward through the Mesozoic era, sea level remained high for millions of years, even flooding much of the American West and depositing more limestone. Even earlier, When the Atlantic Ocean was narrower, sea level was lower, and sand and mud from the ancient Appalachian Mountains eroded down Florida's spine. And what have we got over here?
Okay, now we're down into the Paleozoic, which was before the age of the dinosaurs. We've got slightly metamorphosed rocks. This is quartzite, which is a sandstone that has been metamorphosed. Then going back even earlier to when Florida was part of Gondwana. And these are basalts.
Basalts they're volcanic, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
And how do we know that this is part of Gondwana? How do we know that Florida was part of that great southern supercontinent?
Because these basement rocks are similar in their composition to the rocks in the basement of the western coast of Africa.
So they were side by side.
Yes.
That's great.
I trust you'll forgive the intrusion, sir, but I deemed it judicious to approach you under more private circumstances. A man in my position does best as little observed as possible. Ah, you're a man of few words. Excellent. I like a man of few words. He's more likely to consider his words carefully and get to the point. So, to the point, to the very heart of the matter. I'm the owner and operator of a nightclub on South Beach. Prime location. Square on Ocean Drive. Mesozoic ambiance brings out the more primitive urges of our clientele. Club Jurassique. Mine is an extremely competitive business. Cutthroat, to be sure. Therefore, I must insist on authentic interior embellishments. In this case, bona fide fossils, dinosaurs, hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, the great carnosaurs, but I cannot find one in the entire state of Florida. Neither a bone nor a jaw, or even a splinter or a tooth fragment.
I had an idea about this situation, but I would have to work on the details.
I will therefore require your services to, pardon the expression, unearth the location of any dinosaur fossils in Florida. I will not condescend to avail myself of any of the more commonplace fossils of Utah, Montana. I trust that a man of your caliber is equal to the task put before you. So we have an agreement then? Excellent. I look forward to a collaboration that'll be in both of our mutual interests. So I shall return when you see me next.
Dinosaurs are big, dangerous stuff. Nothing marine about them. They all lived on land. Have to start with terrestrial deposits. And the oldest was going to be up here. So we're back to the dinosaurs, the charismatic megafauna of the ancient world. Their fossils have been found on every continent, including Antarctica. So why should Florida be any different? And was it? I arranged to meet Dr. Roger Portell at the Florida Museum of Natural History. He's a paleontologist with a wide range of experience with Florida's fossils. I had to chase him down in the field at a quarry outside Gainesville. Roger!
Hey, Chuck.
How are you?
I'm doing fine.
Let's take a look at some of this stuff.
So, Chuck, do you want to see the oldest fossil found at the surface in Florida?
That's why I'm here.
Well, good. Here's a beautiful piece of fossil seagrass.
And you just find them lying around at the surface
We
there, huh?
sure do.
So what is this then?
These are some fossil seagrass blades.
So if this was seagrass, that means this area was underwater?
It sure was.
Okay. So if this is the oldest exposed fossil stratum in Florida, that's much more recent than the age of dinosaurs, isn't it?
Absolutely. If there were dinosaurs here, and we have no evidence that dinosaurs ever existed in any of the Florida
So there are
strata.
no fossil dinosaurs in Florida
No.
anywhere?
None that we found.
Ah, okay.
And if they were to be found, they would be found deep within Florida's subsurface rocks, if they exist in Florida at all. You might find them in the northwestern part of the Panhandle, but at great depth.
So I guess that means we're out of luck with dinosaur fossils. Anything else big and fossil and charismatic and still dead?
Absolutely. We have lots and lots of large animals that live even in the Eocene.
Fossil animals?
Fossil animals in Florida. And if you go over to the Florida Museum of Natural History and visit Richard Hulbert, I'm sure he'll be happy to show you some.
Very good. Thanks very much, Roger.
You're quite welcome. You take care.
All right. The Florida Museum of Natural History got its start back in 1891 as the Florida State Museum and has been growing ever since. I'm going to visit their Hall of Florida Fossils.
Well, is this what you had in mind?
Wow!
This is Mammuthus columbi, the Columbian mammoth. They lived in Florida from 12,000 years ago, back 500,000 to 1 million years ago. This is the American mastodon, also another skeleton from North Florida. The scientific name of this guy is Mammut americanum, named over 200 years ago. These were first found up in the Northeast, places like New Jersey and Massachusetts. Well, you certainly don't want to forget your Smilodon skull.
The true saber cat. This might just do the trick. Thanks very much,
You're
Richard.
welcome.
Gardenia. Mr. Cairo, you can come in.
Thank you. I understand you have quite a reputation for solving certain kinds of mysteries. I have quite a puzzle that you may find interesting as well. You see, I'm also interested in certain aspects of the geological structure that lies beneath our feet. I'm in the business of building and selling homes, Mr. Diamond, and I've recently established a new enterprise in the north of our state. I've been entertaining the greatest hope of financial success from this venture, particularly as my product tends towards the, how do you say it, high end of the market. But you must consider my chagrin when I was informed that several of my homes had disappeared overnight. Some nothing more than foundations. Others, I am told, with the buyers already in residence, scrambling to save themselves. I'm sure I do not have to tell you what a difficult position this has put me in. I've not been able to bring myself to visit the site. I'm hoping that you will be able to examine the circumstances of this event and inform me how I may go about avoiding any repetition of it in the future.
Could it be? I had a hunch, but I wasn't going to let it slip until I could investigate the site for myself. There it was. Or its twin. A sinkhole, and his Northern Florida enterprise was the place for him. I knew they could appear overnight, the ground sometimes collapsing for hundreds of feet all around. But I was going to have to give Mr. Cairo more of an explanation. I had a hunch they had something to do with the underlying rock. That's it, the limestone. No wonder they call the guys who study this stuff soft rock geologists. It turns out that limestone has some unusual characteristics that give Florida its unique structure, including caves and the hidden water supply. I thought I'd find you here.
How are you doing?
Okay, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I'm trying to find out a little bit about Florida geology.
Well, it's all about limestone and water.
Why am I not surprised?
We have sand just overlying the limestone, and rainwater coming down through the atmosphere picks up carbon dioxide, creates an acid, falls on the ground, and as it seeps through, it picks up more organic acids, and it gets into the limestone and starts to slowly dissolve it. Now, we've had many sea level fluctuations over millions of years, and each time the sea level is low, you can have some of the limestone start to dissolve. So we've got very old caves and very young caves, very big caves, very small caves. And we have a lot of what are called fractures in the rock. That's natural breaks in the rock that allow the water in more quickly. So sinkholes tend to form along those lines of fractures more than other areas. Once the cavity has formed, then if it can no longer support its roof, it collapses.
And that's when you get a sinkhole.
Right, that's when you get a sinkhole. And they can form fairly quickly over minutes, hours, or over years, where just the top of the limestone is slowly dissolved away and slowly lets the surface down.
And you have maps, I guess, that can tell you where these sinkholes can occur?
We have maps that show the general areas. Nobody can predict exactly where a sinkhole is going to open. It's just not, it's like predicting when and where an earthquake is going to happen. Geologists know that in this general broad area, you can get sinkholes, but to say that one is going to occur at point X in the next 3 days, somebody's lying to you.
Okay, thanks very much.
Sure.
Can I get a sample of this water, do you think?
Sure.
I suppose by this time they had all introduced themselves, but I wasn't going to dwell on the niceties. I began by telling Miss O'Shaughnessy that her map was right, only it was 200 million years out of date. As the continent separated, the small marine creatures began the work of building up the limestone platform. I told her not to worry a pretty little head about that island of hers, that it would be just fine until global warming really clicked in, whenever that might be. I wasn't looking forward to it, but I had to break the bad news to a large friend that the Great Bahama, Florida platform had been underwater for much of the last 150 million years, accumulating those huge thicknesses of limestone, and that his precious dinosaurs were long buried ages ago. I suggested that he go with some slightly more recent extinct giants. As for Mr. Cairo, I explained how the peculiar properties of much of that limestone under the influence of slightly acidic rainwater and groundwater eventually tends towards dissolution and collapse.
Admirably done, sir. Admirably. Obviously, I'm disappointed with the results. But what is done is done. Club Pleistocene doesn't quite have the same ring to it, and mastodons are not quite as evocative as Triceratops. Pangea is taken, but perhaps Gondwana might suffice. Well, sir, the shortest farewells are the best.
I thank you. I believe I shall confine my future enterprises to more solid terrain further north.
Goodbye. If you're ever in the Bahamas, you know where to find me.
What's that?
It's the stuff that streams are made of. We almost never get sinkholes in southern Florida, but we should be able to find some place where we can see the dissolution process working on the small scale. Aha, here we are. Very good. Okay, this is great. Perfect. Look at this. All right, this limestone was laid down chiefly by small marine organisms called bryozoans, or moss animals, less than 1 million years ago during one of the last high sea level stands. But after sea level dropped, the slightly acidic fresh rainwater and groundwater did the rest. Anything from hand size to barbecue pit size and everything in between, but a little soggy for ribs.